It's been 2 months since the Bushiroad revealed that Chaosbreaker Dragon is returning to Vanguard. Yet, till this day, we have no clue what the actual card is going to do. But today, we're going to try to answer that question, which is on every card fighter's mind. Stand up! Vanguard! So we're about to enter a new phase in Vanguard where we start to see the new reveals for the upcoming Clan Selection Plus sets, and starting next week these reveals are going to rapidly increase as we're probably going to see a big reveal every 1 or 2 days from that point onwards. But most of those reveals are probably not the biggest interest to most players, as everybody knows the most important card that has been teased so far is Chaosbreaker Dragon. And since the 2 months that he's been teased, and yes, it has been that long, we haven't got any information about the card, any type of support for the clan, or whatever it's going to do or what it's going to mean for Link Joker. So today I'm going to answer what Chaosbreaker Dragon might do once we get his official reveal in about 1 or 2 weeks from this video. Now there are a lot of information that we can utilize to get a clear indication of what Chaosbreaker Dragon might or might not do and how they might approach this particular card. And there has been a lot of speculation in the community about what this card could potentially do, as it's probably the most hyped and anticipated card from both sets combined. And I think there are 3 potential outcomes of what Chaosbreaker Dragon could potentially do if Bushiroad utilized a certain design direction that they already utilized in the past. And for the first potential skill prediction is going to be the most generic one and the one that has been speculated the most in the community, and that is that Chaosbreaker Dragon is going to have a lock skill, or that he is going to have a supporting archetype with the 2 new cards that will allow them to lock your opponent's board. And the reason why this is very likely is that Chaosbreaker Dragon is the main bad guy of the Link Joker archetype, or the Star Vaders, that's all around locking. And yes, so far we haven't seen any type of lock skills within Link Joker that locks your opponent's board, because Messiah can lock its own stuff, but nothing of the control type where we lock our opponent's board, where they basically cannot do anything and they're basically sitting duck for your onslaught. Now there are 2 potential outcomes if this is going to be the skill for Chaosbreaker Dragon. One of those outcomes is that it will dictate the other unknown cards for Link Joker. If Chaosbreaker Dragon is going to lock something and it has a lock skill, it's probably very likely that the other 2 cards are going to support that playstyle, and potentially they will also lock cards if there's a lock card on the board, or if your Vanguard is Chaosbreaker Dragon, so it cannot be utilized in other archetypes to not make them a bit too strong. And the reason why this is very likely is that if Chaosbreaker Dragon is a card that just locks 1 or maybe 2 cards a turn, it might not be good enough if that's potentially all it does. It's just a little bit of a stall mechanic, but it's nowhere good enough to actually make a dent in the current meta, as most clans just will laugh at it as it doesn't really do anything. So it's very likely that the other 2 support cards will help Chaosbreaker Dragon to actually make it a functioning deck that can do something. Now the second potential outcome, if Chaosbreaker Dragon is going to have a generic lock skill, is that it might be the only unit. Bushiroad might take the route where Chaosbreaker Dragon actually is going to lock a card, or maybe 2, but they think maybe that's enough, and the other 2 cards are going to be something completely different, maybe the leader's cards or something else, or maybe Messiah support, and they're just going to leave Chaosbreaker Dragon as its own engine. Now, the issue is, if that's going to be the case, it's probably very likely that Chaosbreaker Dragon is going to be underperforming and super underwhelming if it's only going to lock 1 or 2 cards and that's it. They might go overboard and allow it to lock the entire board in a certain scenario, but I think they're not gonna do that because it's kind of crazy if they go that route. But that's probably the 2 potential outcomes if it's going to have a lock skill. Now for the second option for Chaosbreaker Dragon's skill is something very interesting, because this takes a page out of the book of premium Link Jokers. Because in the previous Premium Collection 2020, Link Joker got a very unique new stride, which is Nebula Dragon, Barrio and Dragon. And this card had the unique skill where it could delete or just remove all of your opponent's gift markers. All of their force markers, all of their exile markers, all of their protect markers, no matter where they are, even if the protect markers are in the hand. And it also gets a bonus effect for every single marker it deletes. Now, this type of skill could also be used on Chaosbreaker Dragon, so that instead of Chaosbreaker Dragon just locks cards, it is going to delete those gift markers. And it can maybe delete only one for a skill, or they can go the exact same route 1-for-1 and just delete every single gift marker, and it might get extra benefit from those gift markers. This allows basically this skill to enter standard as well, and seeing as we're going to get more and more of these type of decks that can accelerate these markers more easily, this type of skill won't really cripple a lot of decks. Even the low budget decks or the low tier decks, I think, can survive to some extent of this skill, depending of course of what the extra benefit Chaos Breaker Dragon is going to get for deleting those markers. If it's just going to delete them outright and that's it, might not be good enough in some scenarios. Now that said, if they do get benefits from deleting markers, then we could get into a scenario where this card could be extremely powerful while also eliminating a lot of strong contenders in the format, which could be a positive or a negative thing depending on the outcome. I do think deleting markers wouldn't be too overpowered. Granted, it all comes down to how they're going to execute it. They can go over the top and make it insane, or they can just do a more balanced approach and make it a very unique type of skill. And I think this skill makes a lot of sense, as Chaos Breaker Dragon really has the status of a final boss card or a final boss unit for Vanguard. And as seen as we're entering the final stage of the V era, and the V era was all around gift markers, I think it's very appealing to have a final boss unit that just destroys that and basically locks that type of advantage engine and takes it as an advantage engine of its own. Really fitting as a final boss unit if you're gonna ask me. Now with those two potential skill outcomes, we're going to get to the third and final one, and this is my personal favorite because this opens up a lot more room for designability and also within the set itself for the other two supporting cards. So for the third potential skill outcome, I think Chaos Breaker Dragon is going to lock cards. And yes, before you're going to get, but wait, that's the same as the first one. So what's the difference between this and the third one? Well, let me explain a little bit. In the first skill suggestion, where he's going to lock just generically, I explained that he's probably going to need extra support cards, and that dictates that the other two unknown cards need to be Star Vader cards that help Chaos Breaker Dragon to actually do something with those lock cards, or help him to actually lock more cards. Now in this scenario, which I'm proposing, he doesn't need that support card, because the support already exists. Because what I suggest for the third skill, it's not that he just outright locks a card, it's that he changes the skills on Link Joker cards. Link Joker has skills that can bind cards, and they have skills like this Grade 3 Armatelber Dragon, where it's some type of condition, and then it follows with choose one of your opponent's rear guards, comma, and bind it face down. What I suggest is that Chaos Breaker Dragon has a continuous effect while it's on the Vanguard circle, where it changes the sentence, comma, and bind it face down into, comma, and lock it. So every card that could bind cards face down now suddenly can lock those cards. And the reason why this makes sense is because most of those cards that actually bind cards are old Star Vader cards, or cards with the black rings like we see with Armatelber Dragon, that were of the Star Vader archetype, that were all around locking your opponent's cards. So changing their skills into actual lock effects not only makes a lot of sense in thematic instance, and as we all know, Vanguard and Bushiroad is all about that theme within their card game, so that makes a lot of sense in that aspect, but at the same time it also gives Chaos Breaker Dragon the support it needs to actually make it workable. And interesting enough, some of the leader cards will work with it, and it also makes sense because in the G era and in the OG era there were the leader cards that could lock cards. So it makes sense that it has this mixed match of potential outcomes. And if it has a skill like this which changes all these bind effects, that not only means that Chaos Breaker Dragon has enough support that already exists, it then also means it opens up the slots in this set for other cards. Maybe more deleter support, because we still need the original deleter Oxkis or Orxis, which was the OG boss unit for deleters for the Grade 3 from the movie. Would love to see it returned. Yes, I'm still going to suggest my previous video where I have a different theory of what the support is going to be. Definitely gonna plug my own stuff. Another interesting thing, if they're gonna make Chaos Breaker Dragon changes this skill, it also opens up more future designability in their cards, because Chaos Breaker Dragon needs to be on a Vanguard circle to change these bind cards. So that means every single card in the future that allows you to bind cards not only support binding archetypes like the Schwarzschild Ride Chain or just generic bind face down mechanic within Link Joker, but it now also supports Chaos Breaker Dragon. So they have two different decks that they increase with power potential while only releasing one card, which is a really interesting dynamic that they can make in a clan. And for anybody that thinks that this is impossible and they would never take this route because why would they change the card skill or anything, they've done this in the past multiple times before. A good example is just go to Great Nature, because they are the masters of this. Because the whole Isabel thing is that she changes the skill that has choose one or the two depending on the outcome of the lottery mechanic. She just changes the skill that you get both, no matter what the outcome. We also have Leopold that just changes an auto ability and now makes it trigger twice. We also have the new Isabel, which can just forcefully activate unplaced skills without them actually being unplaced. So Bushiroad isn't hesitant about making skills that changes the dynamic of other skills. So it's possible that we're going to see Chaos Breaker Dragon not necessarily by locking cards directly or getting locked card support, but it might change all the old Star Vader cards that they bind cards now suddenly can lock cards, which makes a whole lot of sense, as it opens up a lot of potential for Chaos Breaker Dragon and to open up a different type of playstyle while not having the need to dedicate specific card slots for that specific playstyle, as they can now support two playstyles for the effective cost of one. But that's just a theory, a Vanguard theory. But all jokes aside, I think all three outcomes that I discussed in this video are very likely. It's very likely that Chaos Breaker Dragon either is going to just generically lock cards, so we're going to get some support cards, but I can see them also take the gift marker destruction route, as seen as they already did it on the Stride, so it's possible that they might incorporate it in Standard, as we haven't seen it in Standard yet, and with the new acceleration of Exo markers and Force markers that we're seeing nowadays, especially with the latest sets in Bermuda Triangle, it isn't that hard to imagine that they might go this route, but personally, I'm more favor of the changing skill interaction, where it changes bind effects into lock effects, because that means that Chaos Breaker Dragon actually has a decent amount of support. Because if Chaos Breaker Dragon just have two support cards in themselves, it's very likely that it isn't going to be very strong. And as we've seen with the latest two reveals with Fromage and with Dauntless Drive Dragon, Fromage is okay but not amazing because she's very limited to the amount of support she has. But Dauntless Drive Dragon, being super generic as it is, looks pretty amazing and has a lot of future potential. Now, Chaos Breaker Dragon needs to be the big bad of the whole series and what it is. So I hope they're going to take the more generic approach. And in this case, changing bind skills into lock skills is probably the best way to go. And I already explained it. All those former cards were Star Vaders and they have all those black rings. It would be very poetic if Bushiroad planned this from the start. So we just have to wait a couple of weeks before we get the answer which skill is going to be on the card. But with that said, let me know in the comments down below what your suggestion is for what Chaos Breaker Dragon is going to do. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one!